So welcome to our second episode of our brand new Rugspirations, where we do short interviews to meet rug makers of all kinds and hopefully from all over. That's the goal. So my name is Robin. I'm Robin Whitford of Hooking Outside the Lines, and I'm the creator of the Creativity Club for rug makers, and now Rugspirations, because I want to meet more rug makers like Laurie here today. And so we'll get started. I have Laurie McRae of Wellington, Ontario. And I have the questions, same questions each time, but we can go off in different ways if we want to. So welcome, Laurie.
Thank you very much, Robin.
And so do you want to just start off by telling us the name of your studio and that kind of thing first?
The name of my studio in Wellington is Eileandonnan, which is a castle in Scotland. My last name is McRae, and the clan McRae inhabit Eileandonnan in Scotland.
Oh my gosh.
So it's a nod to my Celtic roots.
I have been there too.
Have you?
I did just before COVID. Well, it's a long story and I won't get the details, but my grandmother was Scottish from Glasgow, but she would take different family members. She would go back every 2 years. Ever since she came, she was a war bride. And, but she got too sick when I got the age to sort of travel like alone with my grandmother. She was not well enough to take me. So she'd taken my sister and I always wanted to go. And I don't know, I was mid-40s and I was like, what am I waiting for? Obviously my grandmother was long gone, but my husband and I went, and it was my first trip overseas, and Scotland was the only place I wanted to go. And we toured around the Highlands and visited Eileandonnan Castle.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
I have to explain that everywhere I go. So
do you?
It's interesting when the odd person says, I've been there.
I have been there. I did. And I did the whole tour. And oh my gosh, it's a magical place. And actually I knew when in preparation for you coming, this is a rug hooking I did after my visit to Scotland. In Scotland. And I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly, but Ardfrak Castle?
I'm not sure.
Anyway, it's a ruin. You can't go in it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly. But it's in the Highlands, and I had taken so many pictures. This was one of my favorites, but
lots of inspiration there. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get started with the questions. So the first question is always, what or who got you started in rug hooking?
Well, I was, curiously enough, attending a quilting show here in Wellington, and one of the vendors at the show was Loretta Moore from Hooked on the Lake in Westport. And there she was hooking away at a mat. And I was mesmerized by it. And I said to her, do you teach? And she said, yes, I do. And I said, well, would you teach in someone's home? And she said, well, I would. But coming from Westport, I would only come if there were 6 or more people. Mm-hmm. Well, by 6 o'clock that night, I had 8 people.
Oh, perfect.
So I hosted a workshop at my home to get us all started. And that group is still together today. And that was 14 years ago.
Oh, wow. And how many people? Like, is it still the same 8 or has it grown?
We lost one member, but there were 8 of us. And now we're down to 7.
Oh, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know of Loretta Moore as well. I think she's gotten many people started in the rug hooking journey in Ontario.
She's just a lovely human being. She really is.
Yeah.
And a great teacher. And we had a lot of fun. We had a full day. We hosted lunch and had lots of time to learn and practice. And it was great.
Wonderful. Wonderful. What part of the process is your favorite? If you had to sort of pick the sort of the planning, the designing, the working on it, the finishing. And by finishing, there could be 2 parts, I realized, because it could be the finishing as in whipping or framing or whatever, or the sitting back and enjoying the finished piece, or shopping, gathering supplies. I know is popular for a lot of us. Could you pick one?
Let's just say I enjoy every aspect of it, but there are elements that I enjoy more than others. And certainly I was a painter before I became a rug hooker. So for me, I'm compelled to create. And then when I got the skill of rug hooking, I realized the way I was spreading out my wool was not dissimilar to the way I organize a paint palette.
Right.
And so for me, it was, you know, a very creative endeavor based on my painting background. But what I love the most is the creating, obviously. The planning, the design itself, the drawing, creating the drawing, and then making your color selections. And I use a lot of alternative fibers. So I love mixing as much in the way of different things, jerseys, silks. I love the tension involved with jerseys and pantyhose. Mm-hmm. And I also like working with yarn. So all of those different textures go into each piece that I create.
Yeah. Yeah.
The finishing for me, because I sell my work as framed art, the finishing for me is mounting and framing.
Right.
So that's not my favorite part because it's not the creative part. It's not the doing.
Yeah.
I do enjoy when I finish a rug. I feel really fulfilled. I feel totally rewarded for the effort.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely have a certain feeling after it's done. It's like, I don't know, you sit a little taller and which is a great feeling. I have to ask you then, are you not painting anymore, or do you mainly just do the rug hooking now?
No, I divide my time.
Okay.
But I have to be honest, I'm an oil painter, and working in oils with, even with odorless spirits, mineral spirits, you know, it's a more toxic environment.
Yeah.
And it takes more to set up and clean brushes and whatnot. Whereas rug hooking, you can have it by your side and do it any time of day. So it's very convenient, and you keep the discipline easily that way.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Is there something that you wish you'd learned earlier in your sort of rug hooking journey that you'd want to share with other sort of new rug hookers? Is there something that you learned later that you sort of thought, oh?
I spent a lot of time and money experimenting with the different tools. And I favor a linen backing of all the backings because it works with the kind of varied textures that I use in my pieces. It's really good that way. But I wish that I had learned about alternative fibers much sooner, because my work initially was very flat looking. And when I started to experiment with all the different textures of these other fabrics, I realized it was really coming to life in a way that was much more painterly and exciting to look at and to work with. Like, it's fun to work with those different materials. So, you know, for me, I went through a number of different frames, for example. Oh my gosh, I mean, I've owned everything imaginable. And I started with Loretta on a Q snap.
Yep.
So, but it's not very practical for large pieces. Then I went to hoops, and I couldn't get the tension right on a hoop. And then I went to gripper frames. And the first frame I had was, the ball joint was squeaky as all get out. It wasn't very practical. I now have a Snapdragon frame, and I love it. I love this frame. So I finally found the frame that I really love. Then there's the myriad hooks that one can get. And I have extra long fingers and larger hands. Oh. And I started out with a little Moshimer hook.
Yep.
And it was too tiny for my hands. And often the hook itself was too tiny for the alternate fibers. So I have a much more weighty and heavy handle on my hook now, and it's a much larger hook now.
Interesting.
So I think you have to find your way. Every individual is going to experience it differently, and what is comfortable to them is not necessarily what's comfortable for me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you find that too.
Yeah. 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 But and I think it's such an important lesson, because I don't know all rug hookers, but many that I've talked to have sort of said like, oh, I wish I knew, you know, that I could do this way instead of just this way. And, you know, when we teach our beginner classes, I think it's so important to remember, like, to offer it as one way, like whatever you're teaching, this is one way, but there are others. And as you explore and, you know, grow as a rug hooker, you can discover your favorites.
Getting the right tools for you. And some people experience, you know, pain with their wrist or arm, and they need to have support there, or an ergonomic hook of some kind.
Yeah.
And if you're dealing with much wider strips, that's something else, is that you eventually over time decide on what the strip width for you is ideal and for your body. I don't do wide cut at all because I find it's very hard on the body.
Yeah.
But I mostly hook in a 5 or less, but no fine cut, no 3s and 4s for me generally. It doesn't move fast enough for me.
Yeah. Well, and I'm too rough, I think, with the, 3s. I just shred them and it's too frustrating. So if I'm going to go small, I'd rather use yarn. Like if I want detail, I'm happy to use yarn too. Yeah. No,
or I often pick pantyhose if I want to highlight an area with just a few highlights.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Oh, interesting. And do you dye your own pantyhose then, or do you collect them?
Okay. So here's the other thing. I divide my time between oil painting and rug hooking. I have to be careful not to water down my efforts. And I took a dye class and I loved it. And I could spend a whole day doing that.
Yeah.
But when I'm honest with myself, what I really enjoy is the actual doing of it. So I actually buy dyed pantyhose from Karen Kaiser in Belleville.
Oh, that's, I know Karen, and I'm going to have to reach out to her. I didn't even think of that. Yeah. No, I love to dye too, but yes, it's a whole other craft. Like each part of these to me is like another element that you could just do, full time, like in terms of there's so many.
Yeah, I say to people say, oh my gosh, your work is so eclectic. And I say, yes, unfortunately, I have creative, expressive attention deficit. Oh, look at that. That's neat. That's neat. So I have to watch it. I really do.
Yes. Well, as a professional artist, I would imagine, like you need to have a certain amount of production as well, not just having a great old time playing with different things.
Right. Yeah. I think if you're just a serious hobbyist, that's wonderful. But you're right. I have to prepare for shows. My studio is open on Saturdays to the public. So I have to hang new work. I just have to get it out there. Right.
Yeah. There's a different expectation, but that's awesome. Well, we touched on this, but what is your favorite foundation fabric, material, or tool? Now you mentioned linen, which is, I think is the gold standard for many of us. Do you have a favorite tool or other sort of material that you'd want to share?
No, just as it relates to backing, I really haven't experimented that much with other backings. I'm going to be honest about that. I've always enjoyed working with linen. I've learned to manage the variation in the weave. And I think it's important to new rug hookers in particular. I know that there shouldn't be hard and fast rules, but one of them that helps them keep their work straight is to create a hold line around the piece. It doesn't have to be a permanent hold line, but at least square it off and get it quite as even as you can, especially with linen too. Because if your frame is overly taut, you're going to stretch the weave, you're going to alter the shape of your piece.
That's so interesting, actually, because I think it was just yesterday, I was talking to somebody about things that they had wished they'd learned. And she had shared, she'd been a rug hooker for 10 years and had never done a hold line. And then when somebody suggested it, because I guess, and I haven't seen her work up close, so I don't know, but because the squareness had been a factor for her, or she felt that it changed everything. She just felt so much better. And I don't typically put a hold line.
Oh, you don't? No.
I don't, but I'm very, very careful when I design my pattern or put the pattern on, that my Sharpie line is in the ditch. Like
in the ditch. Yeah.
Nothing worse than getting or seeing a pattern and it's sort of like crossing the grid lines of the linen weave. It's like, no.
Yeah. And I think the other thing when I work with alternate fibers, they have different, they behave in different ways. So you're not always going to get a straight line of any kind. So a whole line with a cloth or wool cloth strip is what I would recommend to keep the dimensions even, or as even as possible. Yeah.
And do you typically leave your hold line there, or do you take it out after?
Oh, I often take it out after. And if it's a big piece, it's sort of a shame, but anyway, I have to frame my work and it has to fit into dimensions exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, it's an important element to get it straight.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Can you describe what rug making does for you? Like, is there a way you could explain, like, why do you keep coming back to it?
Well, it does so much for me. My goodness. First of all, I love the physicality of it. I find the business of pulling loops is positively meditative. It's highly rhythmic. Mm-hmm. It is mindful and mesmerizing. I really enjoy that. It keeps coming back because I can't wait. When I finish a piece, I can't wait to go to the next piece. Yeah. Because of my compulsion to create. Yeah. And it just gives me a tremendous amount of sort of positive outlook.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that amazing that like wool and linen and, you know, making designs on it can have such an impact?
It is. I mean, it's joyful. It's positively joyful. Yeah. And the colors that are surrounding me as I work are just so vibrant and exciting to be with, like, and the tactile nature of the fabrics. And it gives you a tremendous amount. I don't know of, my mother did a great deal of needlepoint. She was a knitter. I had these textile arts around me all my years of growing up. Mm-hmm. But she never tried rug hooking. I think she would have loved it. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. And had you learned knitting and those other things from her, or?
You know, I learned basics of knitting. I'm not a knitter, believe me. She tried to teach me needlepoint and it didn't move quite as fast as I wanted it to. Yeah. So I never embraced it in the way that she did. No.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I wonder, because I went through a phase, like, I don't know, 25 years ago of needlepoint and cross stitch. But at that time, I just wanted something to do with my hands. I didn't have the mental creative space at the time to design my own. So I was thinking like somebody like you who just wants to create and is a painter wouldn't have been satisfied either with those kind of kits of, you know, just, you know, put your green here and put your orange here, and which was what I did and what my mother did in needlepoint. It's very
well, I think, yeah, everyone should start with a kit. I mean, I don't think that, you know, a raw beginner, they should learn to make a stable piece, and the stability in the craft has to be learned. Mm-hmm. The artistic elements can come as you develop. Mm-hmm. So, and color planning. A lot of people struggle with color planning. I think a workshop on color is probably a really important thing to do, to understand the complementary colors and a little bit about composition if you're going to design your own as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. I am going to pull up your rug that you shared with me. I ask everybody to send in just one, which I know is a really hard thing to do. And I would invite anybody viewing to go and visit Laurie's website, because she has lots more rugs there that you can see, and some of her paintings as well. But can you tell us about this one and why you chose it? And it's absolutely gorgeous, first of all.
Oh, thank you. You know what? I just grow coleus in my pots in my backyard in the summer months. And I actually love doing florals, but I think also foliage is as beautiful as the flower itself, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And I have a series I've done of hostas as well. I just love foliage. And this was a simple photograph of what was growing in my pot with creative license to add a purple background of this spot dyed piece of wool. And I think there's yarn in that one as well.
Yeah.
So that was really a fun one to do. But I'm going to be honest, the veining was a bit tedious at times.
Yeah. Well, it is gorgeous. That was well worth the time that I'm sure it took. And how big is this piece? It's always hard to see or imagine in a photograph. Like, do you work?
It's only 2 by 2, so it's 2 feet by 2 feet.
Okay, well, only that seems big enough. I guess it's all perspective. And do you never do floor rugs then, or all of yours artwork for the walls?
I have sold floor rugs. Yes, I finished a large geometric earlier this year. And you know how you like to, even if you sell your work, you practice detachment. Yeah. So I'm used to that. However, this was a big one. It was a 2.5 by 3 foot mat. It was a whipped finish, which takes a while too.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't in the studio a day, and it was sold.
Wow.
So it is going on someone's floor somewhere.
Yeah.
Not mine.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the share of that. It is so beautiful though. I love color, and the mixing of the reds and the purple in there is just like, yes.
Thanks. It's unexpected, I think.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think it's a little bit of like, oh, she went there.
Oh, wow. Who'd have thought?
I'm not a gardener, but I recognize those leaves, and so I wouldn't have known what they were called, but I recognize them, and they are unique in themselves. Like the way they have the purples and reds and greens in the same plant.
Yes.
Then you chose to add the red, or the purple is just so fun. Well, thank you so much, Laurie. It's been a real pleasure to get to know you a little bit, and I hope to come out to Wellington sometime. I absolutely love that corner of the world, and visit your studio in person. And so you said it's open every Saturdays, and you have a website, which is, do you want to say it again, just in case?
It's just lauriemcrae.ca. So I'm easy to find. If you plug in the studio name, it'll automatically pop up on search.
Perfect. And I will put that in with, this is on YouTube. It'll go underneath, and the link will be there, so you can connect directly and see the other beautiful work that Laurie makes. So thank you, Laurie. And take care. Keep creating.
You too. And I hope to meet you someday, Robin. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.